Please God, let me get hit by a bus.
Okay, look, I know, title of the video, I get it, but I just like pretentious shit. Can't help it, it's a lot of fun. I love watching those YouTube videos of people quoting random philosophers while I'm sitting on the toilet. When I'm at the gym, there's like a 50% chance that I'm listening to something like,
I don't believe in human rights.
Or a well-researched, well-edited video about how Spotify is gay actually. But the thing is, pretentious is an adjective that definitionally describes a false or overblown importance. And I'd like to think that the things that I watch, the things that I read, and especially the stuff that I make can surpass that description. So when I ask the question, is Valorant art? I promise you that this isn't just some pretentious woke bullshit. And thinking about Valorant as a work of art is not just beneficial to appreciating the game, which, I mean, it's a video game, you probably should be having a little bit of fun, you're kind of ruining my ranked games. Art can even help you improve as a gamer, as a player yourself. So before we jump into the rest of the video, I just want to say thank you to today's sponsor, absolutely no one, somebody please give me some money. But before we get into Valorant, first we need to figure out, are video games art? Yes. Seriously, no, they just are. And there are many games that have proven the capability that games can bring to the table. Things like Portal, Breath of the Wild, Spec Up the Lines, and Journey all are super influential and take advantage of the medium of video games. Now, when you think about those stories in any other type of format, it just wouldn't work as well because it lacks the interactability that video games inherently have. But compare that with films, both are experienced through sound and visuals, but there's a big difference between the passive watching and active playing. Video games just require a higher level of immersion than movies. Whether you're engaged with a film or on your phone, even falling asleep, movies will just keep on going without you, where games cannot proceed without your input. So with that in mind, you could pretty easily imagine what awesome things you can do with video games to create some amazing pieces of art. But like, really, anything can be art, right? I mean, like, this toilet can be art, banana duct taped to a wall, art. Even a silly little video game about shooting guns with superpowers. It's all art. So then why the hesitancy? Why do I even have to ask this question in the first place?
As a general maxim, art can be argued to include much more than it can be argued to exclude. I can sooner persuade you that a nicely made doorknob is art than convince you that Michael Bay's Transformer movies aren't, despite how partial I am to the doorknob.
So why do some people find it so easy to exclude video games as a form of art? Is it because video games are seen as children entertainment, as a toy, media that we're supposed to grow out of as we get older? You know, the same way that you, and definitely not me projecting at all, get weird looks from your friends every time you get a little bit too deep in the conversation about miraculous ladybug lore. Or you know what, maybe it's just that gamer stereotype. You know, we, us gamers, are definitely an oppressed group, even though sometimes we fucking deserve it, holy shit. It's just definitely not fun being looked down upon. Like, trying to publicly elevate video games as an art can be really hard and give you a lot of bombastic side eyes from a bunch of different people. I mean, what am I saying? Even just playing video games in public, pulling out the Switch on a train, feels way worse than, say, pulling out a book. But when cooler and more rational heads prevail, I feel like most people will deny video games as an art is just because there are more fitting labels to the medium. Like, when you think about it, Valorant feels a little bit more like an esport or a hobby than a capital A art. Which is fair, even understandable. Have a nice day. But you really can't deny the fact that video games as an interactive medium can lead to some really cool effects. Things like cognitive shortcuts. You know, like when you're driving a car. Young people don't drive cars anymore, hold up. Like when you ride on a bike, you broke fucking loser. You know, you don't think to yourself, oh, I gotta turn my handle to turn the wheel to turn right. You just think to yourself, I gotta turn right. The same thing happens to you when you're playing video games. You don't think to yourself, oh, I gotta press W to move forward. You think, I gotta move forward. You don't even consciously register when you're turning left and right. You just do the action. That's so freaking cool. And that's a level of immersion that most authors and directors would fucking kill for. And that's just something that comes natural to building a video game. I mean, you know, it took a lot of trial and error. My god, some of those old video games are garbage. You just did not know how to play it at all. Especially with the jump from 2D spaces to 3D. Oh my goodness, those camera controls were god awful.
If we've learned anything from Sonic the Hedgehog over here, it's that turning a 2D game into a 3D game, it ain't easy. It ain't even fucking quantifiable. How do you take the simplicity of form that 2D allows, give it a Z-axis? Everything changes, and it seems to turn a really good game design into a completely fucking broken one. Oh god. Oh my god!
Which just goes to show how impressive things are now. We just expect seamless perfection and we receive it every single time. Truly a view built off the back of giants. Hey, let's make sure we edit that last line out for cringe. And with that power in mind, it's genuinely hard not to be a little bit excited about the cool things that artists can create. Like, just imagine all the ways we can harness that level of personal investment to make great moments, to create art.
Yes, teams are on site and attempting to disarm. I repeat, we have a confirmed nuke.
So a little bit of context here. This is Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, the original OG Modern Warfare, baby. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be using the remastered footage just because it's prettier, so keep that in mind. But anyways, you're a soldier, your name is Sergeant Paul Jackson, and you are fighting in a modern day war, or at least modern when the game came out. This is gonna date me so fucking bad. Oh my god, I'm so old. You're dropped down in the Middle East, ready to fight terrorists and win the war against, hold on, let me Google this. No way. It actually just says an unnamed country in the Middle East. That's actually hilarious. Your job is to find Al-Assad, the terrorist organization leader, and basically this entire time you are decked out with a fancy M4A1, flashbangs, grenades, a stock-mounted grenade launcher, body armor, chopper, gunners, a literal fucking tank that you have to escort, and the power to suck your thumb so hard that you can recover from non-critical damage. You know, non-critical damage. The stuff that won't kill you. Like bullet wounds. You see, the game is trying to trick you into believing in this American bravado, this military superiority you have over your opponents. And after fighting wave after wave, pushing through enemy territory and just blowing so much stuff up, by the end you need to start retreating from this nuclear bomb that's just about to go off, and then this happens.
We're hit! I've lost the tail rotor! Mayday! This is deadly, going in hard! We're going down.
So you go down, ignoring all warnings, knowing that no man left behind means something, dodging gunfire from every side, saving the female pilot, carrying her on your back to the helicopter like the hero you are. Hell yeah, that is exactly what Call of Duty is all about. The glory of war, conquest, fighting with brothers in arms, being a hero, being a man. Hell yeah! Ah shit, we forgot about the nuke. Yeah, so this game is actually about fulfilling the modern day power fantasy and then just flipping it on its head. Because trying to be the quote unquote hero isn't actually rewarded, but instead it gets you and your entire squad killed. Yes, and I mean you, the player, because you don't play as Sergeant Paul Jackson. You are Sergeant Paul Jackson. I mean, the warnings were all over the wall. The question is, did you really see them? The ominous music playing in the mission briefs, the mission titles getting progressively more foreboding, even a character just straight up saying the Americans are making a mistake. But of course not, because that's not what you're immersed into. You're immersed into the gameplay, not the story around it. All of that gets washed away in the height of battle. Nuance is forgotten just because you're so enraptured in the actual gameplay of good versus evil. Our fun eclipses the rest of the story and gets in the way of seeing the larger picture until we're forced to face the consequences of our actions. And man, what an amazing moment this is. The dialogue cutting out the bright light, white noise, panic everyone, hang on, we just blah blah blah. Oh my goodness. That immersion that's been built up for this entire game is just completely shattered. It flips our expectations on their head and creates this iconic moment in gaming, forcing us to recontextualize the entire game moving forwards and all of the missions beforehand. When you first played the AC-130 mission, Death from Above, was it fun and exciting, getting to blow shit up like a god from on high? Or was it chillingly horrifying to wield so much power to snuff out the lives of your enemies like they're nothing more than blips on the screen? And how did it feel playing it the second time through? That nuke is something I like to call ludonarrative dissonance. Basically, ludonarrative dissonance is just the disconnect between how it feels to play the game and the story being told within it, i.e. the power fantasy gameplay versus the, horrors of war narrative. This concept was actually hotly debated when it first entered the public discourse. A lot of, is it real, does it matter, who even cares? I find a lot of those kind of deniers to be willfully ignorant of the subject, but I say that about a lot of stuff. Because to me, it's like, of course it exists unless you're reducing games to a non-art. Meaning that video games don't deserve the critical analysis that other mediums get. And you already know how I feel about that. I think my favorite example of this is from Dan Olson from the YouTube channel Folding Ideas, talking about Megan Fox in the movie Transformers. Instead of the systems of interaction, aka the ludo part of ludonarrative dissonance, he discusses the cinematography and how that clashes with the narrative of the story being told.
The character of Michaela Baines is smart, funny, talented, driven, hardworking, quick-thinking, courageous, and mature. She is an active agent in the plot, she comes up with plans, and her personal arc meshes with the rest of the film. The simple fact that she is a mechanic gives her more thematic connection to the Transformers than anything going on with Sam. However, the camera treats Michaela as a piece of meat. People perceive her as being superfluous eye candy, as nagging, as irrational, because that is how she is consistently framed.
And what's so interesting is, specifically when this first became popular, ludonarrative dissonance was only talked about exclusively as a bad thing. Which kind of makes sense because, breaking the immersion in games kind of ruins the experience for players, and usually reaching a level of coherency is a big goal for a lot of larger bodies of work. But in purely academic terms, it is inherently neutral. If Call of Duty had poorly timed comedic bits, it would ruin the entire flow of the game. But we can also see how ruining the immersion of the game can actually highlight the story being told, and that's exactly what Call of Duty Modern Warfare does. And I know this is a bit of a tangent, but oh my god, we didn't even talk about the next mission, Aftermath. You just die. The game puts you in this quiet, thoughtful little scene of a destroyed city as the entire emotions just sink in. You struggle to your feet, basking in the glow of mushroom clouds, watching as a building is blown away like dust in the wind. A burning playground to your right echoes the ghost of childhood memories just before you succumb to your injuries and radiation poisoning. Absolute cinema. It's just like a good punch, a big wind-up gives it a lot of power, the impact that's quick and hits hard, maybe it's shown 3 times in different panels, and then the aftermath that just forces you to sit there. That's the part that really hurts. And in that moment, you're not just watching your character die. In a way, yes, you are dying, but you're also watching that power fantasy that you thought you were playing this entire time. You're watching that die with you. Back to Valorant. You remember when this video was about Valorant? That's crazy. So we can pretty conclusively say that video games are art, and Valorant is a video game, so therefore Valorant is art? Huh? See what I'm getting at? Yeah, so that's definitely the end of the video. Don't look at the timestamp. Don't stop it. I see you. Stop moving that mouse, motherfucker. Okay, so there's a lot more to this video. I definitely could just edit here, but as you know, this is just the beginning. This is just part 1. So before we get into the topic of is Valorant art, we have to ask ourselves, what is art?
I don't want to take too much of your time, although I value speaking to you very much. I want to open with an easy one. What is art and prove it?
Art's just one of those things that's kind of nebulous, and it's really hard to put any sort of definition to it, because the second you do, you start to realize the limitations of what you're trying to say. So, meaning either you're going to get something super vague and super unhelpful, or something too specific that's going to exclude a lot of different types of art. But of course, that's not a very fun answer, so gun to my head, if I had to try, this would be my personal definition of what art is. A personal expression of existence that is meant to be shared to those who also exist and are existing. I know that's super vague, but that's part of the point. Basically, what I'm trying to do is set 3 different limitations to art that makes it art. The first one being the inability to capture real life. All art is just the imperfect human attempt to recreate reality. Within any artistic medium, the best we can really do is capture the limited view of nature. No matter how many extra pixels or brushstrokes that we add, it can never really compare to reality, making it inherently imperfect. And yet, that imperfection is what makes it so special, what makes it art. Plus, if we were really perfect artists, we'd just be a god at that point. And if the Spy Kids trilogy has taught me anything, it's not to play God. Can you tell I haven't seen those movies in a while? So in a funny way, art is basically an impossible task if the end goal is perfection, which is why we often benefit from not even trying to reach that perfection state. AKA, aesthetics versus realism. One of these 2 things are a lot more appealing than the other, while the other one is very comfortably sitting in the uncanny valley. So as a good rule of thumb for all artists out there, the closer you get to reality, the easier it is for our brains to pick up on the imperfections in your art, which is why it's better, generally, to aim for aesthetics over realism. Limitation of art number 2, subjectivity. Authorial influence will always be a corrupting force against truth in art. Basically, if limitation number 1 was about scale, limitation 2 is about bias. No matter how hard you try, there's no art devoid of meaning, and there's no meaning without our influence. That's what I mean when I say art is a personal expression of existence. The personal part is what describes our subjectivity. And finally, limitation number 3, art is meant to be shared. In my personal opinion, it's not really art if it doesn't affect others. It doesn't matter matter how art it looks or feels, if it's never finished, if it's never released, it never becomes real. It's sort of a if a tree falls down in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound kind of situation. The experience of the sound is what makes it significant, so if no one's there to hear it, doesn't really matter. And that's what I mean when I say in my definition of art that it is meant to be shared by those who also exist and are existing. So yeah, that's my definition of art, and I proved it, I think.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
So now that we have a working definition and a bunch of other useless ramblings about stuff I care about, does Valorant fit this description? And I'd say, yeah. Yippee! Valorant is the developers, there's a fire truck outside. Valorant's the developers' personal expression of the world that they wanted to share with us. And this world just so happens to be superheroes with guns, but as mentioned before, art is more inclusive than exclusive. I'm keeping that take, I don't care about the fire truck. Okay, so it looks like we answered the question of this video. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed, like and subscribe to have your balls jiggled.
Just want somebody. I just want somebody to jiggle my balls.
But you know, like, of course Valorant isn't art. The real question is it a worthwhile descriptor? Like, you can describe people as 60% water, but that doesn't really help us understand a lot about who we are. No teenage boy is gonna build their personality around being mostly water. That's what Turning Point USA is for. I mean, that's what anime is for. By the way, have you seen the Catholic Church's new anime mascot? I think her name is Lucci. Like, I know it's basically propaganda, but I just love it. You know how cute this is. So the real question of the video isn't, is Valorant art? It really should be, is thinking about Valorant as a piece of art useful? Which, you know, would make for a much worse YouTube title. So as we talked about before, I basically see there's 3 different ways of looking at this. There are those weirdos and freaks like me who think of Valorant as an art. There are those who merely just play the game as a hobby, you know, both the normies, non-derogatory, and the e-daters, derogatory. And finally, there are those sweaty, stinky, and surprisingly good-looking group of esports gamers. Oh boy. Yeah, maybe I will buy a Ascend bundle. So I already know that Valorant is an art, but can it be better described as an esport? Oh, maybe. And I'm not even just talking about the pro scene, the VCT stuff, because we already talk about Valorant kind of like a sport. The interaction and competitive nature of Valorant kind of aligns really well with traditional sports already. Things like how we talk about balance and how competitive viability colors our perspective on things like agents and maps, or how the meta and how we should be playing the game is based around the pros and who gives them the best chance of victory. Hey look, it's how conservatives wish trickle-down economics worked. And heck, most Valorant content is based around competition, coaching videos and guides, things like challenge contents, or just streamers' comps games all edited down and made more digestible. I mean, we got a rank system for a reason. I don't think it takes a genius to figure out why. The only thing really missing from the sports description is the physical movement part, and you know, I'm not gonna argue that moving a mouse and pressing keys is a physical activity. If you think so, go touch some grass. So yeah, Valorant can definitely be described as an esport. And as for a hobby, I mean, any art or sport can be seen as a hobby. I mean, what is a hobby if not the swift play of life? There for the good times, the people, the Fortnite funnies of the Valorant content creation world. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with just playing for fun. Like, does rank even matter if you're not having a good time?
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Good! Say it louder.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Louder.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Louder.
I'm ugly and I'm proud. I am ugly and I'm proud. I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Is that what he calls it?
So is Valorant more of an art, a sport, or a hobby? It really comes down to the individual. The game is really what you make of it. Like hermeneutics, it's our differing perspectives that lead to multiple interpretations of the body of text, which, you know, in this case would be the game of Valorant. And that in turn changes the way we interact with said media. So of course for me, a lover of music and culture, it's going to be really easy to see Valorant as an art. And a sweat from Counter-Strike will of course find their experience more aligning with the competitive aspects of that game. And this is important because understanding how you perceive the game will let you make decisions that will further your enjoyment. For the case of Valorant, the question is, what do you value? Do you value winning or having a good time, or maybe just appreciating the thing that's in front of you? And I know for a lot of you guys that's like a no-brainer situation, like if you want to win more games you should play more comp, but you just need to be careful. Make sure you're doing the things you actually want. Ask yourself, is what you're doing actually worth it? Is it valuable? Are you consuming media? Or is this media consuming you? So getting off the soapbox, I can understand why it's so hard to appreciate Valorant as an art. I mean, yes, intellectual endeavors can be a lot of fun, you know, brain stimulating shits and giggles, but from a competitive standpoint, I can definitely understand why it doesn't appeal to a lot of people. But fortunately for you, I have a way to make art useful. So let's learn a little bit more about art, how it can apply to the game of Valorant, and then how we can weaponize it to improve ourself and our rank. Firstly, how can we weaponize art? Basically, we just want to use art as a unique observation tool to look at the game from a different direction. This could lead us to new strategies, ideas, or just overall help us understand why we do the things that we do. Or, just help us enjoy and appreciate the game more than we did before. Alright, sure buddy, just put the ELO in the bag. First, let's talk about a few literary analysis tools and see how they can apply to Valorant. Starting off with authorial intent, asking the question, who are the authors of the game and why does it matter? The authors, or in this case the game developers, want their art to have a certain message or meaning conveyed to their audience. And in terms of games, that intent can come down to a lot of different things, including how the player is supposed to experience the game or how the game should be played. In the case of Valorant, we can see authorial intent and how we should be playing certain characters based on their abilities and roles. Like obviously, just by the naming convention, we can tell that duelists want to play more aggressively than a sentinel, which is, by the way, literally a soldier that keeps guard. Authorial intent is usually held to pretty high regards when referring back to the artwork, like a painting how they describe their masterpiece, or a musician who explains their lyrics. It just seems natural to trust the person who made the art to be the expert on their own subject. Like Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton is a great song, but when the author says it's about his dead son, you know that's going to be the accepted narrative by everyone who listens to it.
And carry on, 'cause I know I don't belong here in heaven.
But what's cool about authorial intent is it isn't just limited to the larger themes of narrative and meaning. It can be given to anything or even everything that the author makes a decision to include in their text. And this can get super nuanced in a lot of awesome ways. Like how earlier when I was talking about Call of Duty, I wrote in the script, you play as Sergeant Paul Jackson, but quickly I changed it to, you are Sergeant Paul Jackson, because that small word choice better conveyed the later point I wanted to make about immersion. And yes, I'm using my own script as an example of nuanced authorial intent. This is not a subtle flex. So bringing it back to Valorant, I think the spike is actually a perfect example of this because of its subtleties. Since it's something that's so core to the game, it had to be part of the early stage of design, and it's extremely likely that there's a lot of intent baked into something that's so crucial to the game. So now we can infer authorial intent through a sort of reverse engineering process, like how one aspect of the spike is how it's a non-physical object when it's planted, which means things like players, bullets, and abilities like mollies don't interact with the spike when it's on the ground. At that point, it's just a visual representation of the area you need to defuse in. If you were to remove the spike model during the post-plant situation, the game would function basically the exact same. Except for the fact that it's invisible and it's kind of hard to find at that point, but you know what I mean. And this is a pretty easy question at this point, but we have to ask, why did the authors make this decision? Well, basically, it's just to avoid situations where you get stuck on the spike when you swing, or a situation where you throw a molly or any other type of ability that bounces off the spike. Like, imagine losing a round because your lineup was too perfect and it hit the spike. I'd lose my shit. So if this object is intangible, why doesn't the spike plant directly where our character is standing when we plant? Something else we need to understand about the spike is when we plant it, it's always a little bit in front of the player, even when we look straight down. But if there's no interaction with the planted spike from the attacking side, why does it matter? Like seriously, there's no collision, why offset the position? Doesn't that sound like more coding work? Well, I smell a little bit of a purposeful intent here. I believe the purpose of this is to give the players more agency on where the spike wants to be planted. So you can turn to face to a wall to create a smaller defuse radius, or angle yourself on a ledge to put the spike higher up. This is overall a pretty small advantage, but I like to think the Riot devs were looking into this and wanted to reward those who took advantage of the interaction. But if I had to guess, I think a lot of you guys already knew this trick to turn to face the wall when you're planting a spike, or how to put it on a ledge. And I also bet you think you're pretty smart, don't you? Well, guess what? You are. Yay! You are loved and appreciated. just not by me. So here's a tip I bet you didn't know, that you can defuse a spike while you're in the air. Yeah, seriously, you can, and not just by jet. Because the spike can be placed on different elevations, the game developers had to account for diffuses that are on different surfaces than just flat ground. So the solution was a spherical area around the spike to diffuse instead of a 2D radius. This made it much more flexible to diffuse on sloped surfaces or ledges, and thank God, imagine how buggy it'd be without this. But if you jump while standing directly on top of the spike, you can actually begin to diffuse while you're in the air. If you think about the diffuse radius of a spike as an arc, the apex would be exactly at its center. So if you jump right here, the character model will stay in the diffuse radius, but if you're a little bit left or right, it will accidentally leave it. So when done right, you're also able to make the landing footstep of your jump while making the diffuse sound beforehand. making your opponent think that the defuse was a fake and you just accidentally made a footstep afterwards. So in a situation where you're in a 1v1 post plant and you have yourself smoked off, you can fake the tap to actually sneak a defuse. Also, a small tip for this, you don't have to be directly at the apex of your jump to press defuse. You can actually jump and immediately start defusing, so it's very obvious that there's like a big gap between the defuse sound and the footstep sound, so it's really easy for the enemy to hear and makes the fake actually a lot stronger. This is most likely an unintended side effect, an unexpected outcome of two separate systems interacting, and it's really cool, not really a glitch worth fixing, so it kind of becomes a permanent fixture of the game. Just a little bug that's kind of fun. Kind of like wave dashing in Smash Melee. Like, do I know what that is? No, but I'm pretty sure I nailed that comparison. It's part of the game that was more created by the players, not the developers, but embraced nonetheless. And that meaning, divorced from authorial intent, is its own artistic theory. It's called Death of the Author. I like to think of Death of the Author as the antithesis of authorial intent, or at least in the way that I read things. Like, DOA is literally the practice of ignoring authorial intent in favor of readers' interpretation based solely on the text itself, which, you know, sounds based as fuck. And I'm not the biggest fan of ignoring the authorial intent, more like that the reader's interpretation of the text is equally as valid as the author's. Which really begs the question, did I just Death of the Author the definition of Death of the Author? And the answer is, fuck yeah I did, I do what I want. But I do need to preface that DOA isn't really true, it's kind of just a theory. Like, it's super useful, but there's a lot of problems with Death of the Author as a holistic view on art. But as long as you're just using it as a tool to further your understanding of a piece of art by narrowing your scope down a little bit and just focusing on the text itself, it can be extremely useful. If you want to learn more about this, I really suggest the Lindsay Ellis video on the subject. She has a 2-part series on it, and it's pretty funny. It's pretty great.
Before you start applying literary theories, you want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. There are an awful lot of young people out there who rush into Death of the Author without really understanding its intended purpose. Are you trying to enhance your understanding of a text by secluding yourself from authorial intent or a body of work? Or are you trying to excuse yourself from potential guilt when you find out that your favorite author might be a shitbag, and you don't want to examine what that author does with their platform?
Getting back to it, I think Grimwalls is one of the perfect examples of Death of the Author in practice. Sage's design and purpose from the developers are pretty clearly a supportive and defensive agent that excels at stall. But of course, battle sages exist, and Grim seeing Sage's barrier as a new form of mobility is just brilliant. It opens up a lot of different more aggressive playstyles from the Sage mains that isn't really aligned with the authorial intent, constantly breaking and pushing past the boundaries. It's Grim saying, I choose to define this character not as Riot intends, but instead my own interpretation of her abilities. Riot devs are not gods that prescribe divine meaning. From my understanding, it's just as valid and viable as the one laid out before me. That's a direct quote, by the way. He literally said that. It's not something I just made up right now, you know. I believe Temet, is it Temet? Am I saying that correctly? The one neon guy. I think he's also a great example of Death of the Author, really pushing the boundaries of how you're supposed to be playing this character, even if it's not quite as extreme as Sage's Grim Walls. Interesting enough that one content creator, Toto, is a perfect example of abiding by authorial intent, but none of these playstyles are somehow incorrect. Temet and Grim aren't somehow wrong for ignoring the way that Riot wants them to play their characters. And on the other hand, Toto isn't wrong for leading into the supportive playstyle that KO is designed for. They're just using different frameworks to view the same piece of art and find their own interpretations. It's more just hermeneutics, because even a game like Valorant deserves to be put under the same level of examination and scrutiny as other works of art. You know, like music. Like my music. Go listen to my music. And I love music. You know, I'm a bit of a singer-songwriter myself. I don't know if you can tell. But sometimes I hear a song and I feel like I totally get the wrong vibes, you know? Like my song, A Slow Day, is supposed to be cheerful in its instrumental and especially its chorus, but it creates a sort of cognitive dissonance between the mood and its actual meaning. Maybe audio narrative dissonance. No? Okay. But that's something I did on purpose, and it's really frustrating, especially with like lyrics, when I get the wrong ideas and it just completely ruins the song for me. Like one of my favorite songs of all time is a song called Coffee by Early Eyes, and it has this one line where it literally goes, and it's a direct quote, "We are made up of basement, doorways, and leaves to lay in." But the way I've always heard it, the way I've always kind of sung it myself, was always, "We are made up of the same things, doorways lead to the same place. Which is like, very different, but in my opinion, I kind of like mine better. I like my misheard lyrics a lot more than the actual. Or another great example is the whole party rock is in the house tonight. I think that's stupid. I don't care if I'm objectively wrong. It just sounds better as party rockers in the house tonight. And this is kind of like Death of the Author, but not really. It's kind of just incorrect. Death of the Author is specifically about interpretation from the text, but if you're not going to take the truth from the text, you're just making shit up at that point, and that's what we call headcanons. So obviously headcanons are going to be taken a lot less seriously than DOA and especially authorial intent, mostly because of the lack of supporting evidence. But headcanons can be a lot of fun. You can bring in your own personal biases into the question, guilt-free. And a lot of this does come down to like shipping and fanfic people, but like I think there's a lot of different interpretations of headcanons that can be still seen with a lot of respect, but mostly just my headcanons, because I'm really smart and stuff, so like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about, probably, maybe. So let's have a little bit of fun. Let's do like a little part 3.5 where we talk about headcanons and just have some fun. Just have a little bit of fun. Get away from all the analysis stuff, because man, oh man, some of this stuff can be heavy. Hold up, can we do the title screen again? Yeah, that's better. It's less the fact that headcanons are inherently cringe, or that the personal biases you can bring in often leads to just some fanfic people doing a lot of shipping. Not that that's wrong or anything, I'm not one to yuck somebody's yums, but I can see from the outside perspective that being a little bit annoying. What's important to remember is that not all headcanons are that type of dumb fun, and in fact a lot of headcanons are really strong even though it is not supported by the evidence itself. So to prove my point, here are a few of my headcanons that you can tell me if you think I'm crazy or you think that maybe this makes a little bit of sense. The first one being about Sonic, and I promise I know how this sounds, but it's not gonna get weird, I swear. And I don't even play the Sonic games. It's just the fact that Sonic the Hedgehog has always been relevant to my life. It's kind of crazy. Like 3 movies at this point. 3! So it's really surprising that I know so much about these characters even though I never played it before, especially the music. So there's this one song that goes, rolling around at the speed of sound. I bet there's a few people that just got Vietnam flashbacks right now. But I always thought the next part of that song went, got places to go, gotta follow my own road. Which makes sense visually because Sonic is literally surfing down the San Francisco streets while the song is playing. But actually, no, because the lyrics are, gotta follow my rainbow. My rainbow. I'm sorry, I don't think this is making sense to me. Can you explain how you're supposed to follow your rainbow? It's just a worse metaphor. Like, sure, rainbow kind of fits better with the hopeful vibe of the music, but when you really think about it, you can't reach the end of a rainbow. Like, first off, it's circular, and second off, it's an illusion. I'm sorry, bud, no matter how hard you try, following your rainbow will never lead you anywhere. Unless the song is trying to imply that chasing your dreams, even at the speed of sound, is a futile task, then the lyrics follow my own road is simply a better fit into the song in the context of what is happening than follow my rainbow. You tell me, Sega. Oh, that sounds wrong. You tell me, video game company that makes Sonic the Hedgehog, would you rather have a song about nihilism or one about chasing your dreams in your own unique hedgehoggy way? Number 2, Nico Robin from One Piece is just a little bit autistic. My evidence? She reads books. Even though now she has a bunch of friends, she prefers to be alone, and honestly her best friend is a fucking reindeer. Me too, Robin. Me too. She loves cute things like cats and Chopper, and oh my god, those glasses. And even though she's really seen as like the intellectual and rational one, at least, compared to all the crazy people on the Mugiwaras, her brain will just take these huge leaps of logic into the worst possible case scenario, or just end up in this fantasy land of these weird and honestly adorable things. The anime even draws her thoughts in this childish art style that it's just kind of dorky and a little bit adorable. Adorkable. You could even say that her specialized knowledge in archaeology and language and history is sort of a special interest, maybe even a hyperfixation. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know many 8-year-olds who dedicate themselves to learning about a history so deeply that they teach themselves a dead language. To me, it's kind of given spectrum. Not to say that's a bad thing, to me I love that type of shit. If we're talking about animes, I'm saying, give me your Comies and Fallons and Fearns and Ferns, I love that shit. Nico Robin's just giving me the exact same sort of feeling, the same sort of vibes. But it's just a fun headcanon, just a way that I like to experience. It makes watching Nico Robin a lot more fun for me. And I'd like to clarify that I think this is mostly just post-time skip Robin, or at least it's more pronounced post-time skip. I guess like when she's pre-time skip, she's a little bit more closed off to the rest of the crew, so there'd be less time for that to really shine. Damn, she really did just trade in her cowboy hat and melanin for book core autism. And at this point, I don't even know which one I prefer.
Can Nico Robin or Autistic Robin?
Why can't you have both? You need to pick one. I refuse the question. You can't refuse the question. I do. But you can't. But I did. But you need to pick one. No, I don't. I just said you did. So what?
And the last headcanon that I'll talk about today is The Bear Season 2. I like The Bear, it's a great show. I enjoyed Season 1 the exact same way I enjoy watching a scary movie, having a bad time, absolute peak anxiety, I think I'd die in that kitchen. And I think Season 2 is absolutely amazing. I love Claire and the storyline, how the end, Carmi goes all Donna in the fridge. Oh, by the way, spoilers, my bad. But everyone around him is succeeding because Carmi has helped them inspire and just elevate them to greatness, all while he's having a mental breakdown behind the door that he keeps forgetting to get fixed. It's poetic and beautiful and thematically super strong. The character and story arcs lead to what I think is a logical conclusion, like, sorry buddy, she was too good for you. And that's not even close to the best episode, because like, oh my god, fishes. What I'm trying to say is Season 2 is really good, and I believe it is a perfect ending. It's super satisfying, like a well-structured meal, kind of just exactly what you needed, exactly as much as you deserve. And in my opinion, there's no real ambiguity in the future of the show, like relationship ruined, business kind of looking bright. The only real question mark is if Carmi will be able to bounce back from the whole losing Claire thing and sinking further into that Brizzato spiral. But the fact that he has such a good and powerful support group around him, I think he'll be fine. And all of that is why I refuse to watch the third season of The Bear. And sure, yeah, it's gotten some mixed reviews, but in my opinion, the story has ended. Season 2 kind of nailed it, where they left a few loose ends to keep me thinking about it in the long run, but wrapped up enough to keep me satisfied and happy to walk away from the show. I don't know, it just feels kind of right to me, but you know, if you've seen Season 3, you can tell me if it's worth it or not, or maybe I made the right decision. And if you have seen the second season of The Bear, what I really suggest is watching this video by live.move. She actually has 2 different videos about The Bear, and one of them actually used a clip of earlier just to kind of make a joke, and she's definitely an underrated channel for sure. Like, I know this is a tangent within a tangent, but I gotta shout her out. She's so good, man. It's criminally underrated. Her personality and humor are super clear, even despite her flatter tone, kind of like an Aubrey Plaza if she was slightly less sarcastic and a little bit more articulate. She also just started a Patreon, and I'm like low-key, I think I might be the only person who subscribed, which is kind of funny. And yeah, I'm kind of just glazing at this point, but you know, what can I say? Oh my god, she's tan now. Here, if you don't mind just putting on this cowboy hat, thank you. So let's get back to Valorant and talk a little bit about Vyse. In my first video, I had 2 seconds at the end talking about what I wanted her to look like, the predictions and such, what I thought her abilities might be, and maybe some of her lore. But quick warning, if you haven't seen that video and you're watching this, it's not of the same quality. I'm sorry, it's not a good video. But just after a week or 2 after I came out with that video, Vyse actually got announced, and seeing her abilities, seeing it in action, seeing it played, I had a few doubts about her. Though her abilities were pretty unique, especially the wall, I thought her kit was kind of underwhelming overall. And as the character came out and people got to actually play her, I think a lot of people ended up agreeing that she wasn't really that great. But a few patches have recently come out that has made a huge impact on the Sentinel role and how they're played. Things like Cypher getting a huge nerf, Sage getting a little bit stronger, and Neon getting giga nerfed. All alongside Vyse getting a huge buff and a tiny bit of a nerf in patch 9.11 makes me want to go back and reevaluate her position in the game. Do these latest changes give her enough space to finally flourish as a Sentinel? Will she remain weak against all the other agents in her role? Or maybe Vyse still just kind of sucks? So yeah, that's a lot of questions. Let's break it down a little bit and start off with an easy question. Why do we find Vyse to be kind of mid? What we need to understand is that Vyse is designed sort of as a hybrid between a Sentinel and an Initiator. I mean, it's literally a 50-50 split between her utility. You get the classic passive information, textbook Sentinel map control. You got Razor Vines, the slow and damage, basically perfect stall utility. And you got a motherfucking flash and a retake ultimate. This is just textbook Initiator. Here's the problem. On paper, that kind of sounds like an interesting idea, but in practice, Vyse becomes sort of a jack of all trades and a master of none. In other words, she sort of just sucks at both of her jobs. Especially when you're accounting for the opportunity cost of picking Vyse over a more meta Sentinel, it just isn't worth it. Breaking it down, Vyse is just okay as a Sentinel, you know? She kind of holds her sight, does her job. I mean, Sheer is a good ability, but even if you get the isolation, you still gotta win your ones. Unlike a Cypher Trip or a Deadlock and Cuss, it doesn't really give you the advantage by itself. So you put your vines in the ground, you put your flash on the wall, you get a free kill, and then Well, there goes all of your utility for the round. And speaking of our Razor Vines, it recently got buffed and it's actually really good now. Going from just 6 damage to 10 now for every 1.5 meters walked inside of the vines is huge. For reference, to walk through it, that is 12.5 meters wide, the circle will take 9 ticks of damage, which I know doesn't really math, it should be 10, but whatever. That's 90 damage. Like pre-buff, it'd only be 54 damage, and at that point, it's just worth running through. But at 90, it's a bit of a heavier cost. Arc Rose, the flash, is actually a really great sentinel tool. It's a really cool idea that you can just flash off your wall contact, which is something that I've always done before with like Cypher or Killjoy, but it would have to be with a KO or like a Phoenix to make that happen. I mean, even still, Garden's kind of a good tool to shut down pushes if you use it right. Okay, so this sounds like she's a pretty good sentinel, despite the things I've said before. This doesn't seem like a jack of all trades situation. This seems like she's just really good at what she does. But that's if theoretically everything goes right for her, and the problem is that's just not going to happen. In fact, there are 3 major counter strats that just completely shut down Vyse's full utility setups. The first one being mobility.
In with a frenzy. Wow, that is just the best counter device ever. Dash through, went through my wall, through my thorns. I pop flash, she's in a smoke. She took 0 damage from me, was not blinded, and set off all my util.
There's Jet, who can dash past the vines and just completely bypass your entire setup. Not to mention she can just updraft over the wall or dodge the Arc Rose with her smokes. You have a good Yoru, who can TP past all the vines and walls, not activating it. Double Satchel Raze, who can either go over the wall itself or just trigger the wall and then get to a position that should be safe from the vines. And even Neon nowadays with her fast lane and her slides can get past everything just by sprinting through it. That list right there is literally more than half of all the duelists in their entire role that can counter Vyse. But that's not even the half of it, because the more important way of countering Vyse is through fakes. Any character can go up to the wall, do a little jump fake, and prematurely get the vines to go off and the flash. Though sometimes doing that alone can be a little bit risky, so there's 2 major ways of doing this in a safe manner. The first is just having a smoke. That way when you go for the jump peek, you have a little bit of coverage to make sure you're not getting shot at. If you thought 5 was a lot before, literally every controller in the game can do this on their own. And then you got things like Cypher Cage, Phoenix Wall, even a Sage Wall to break the shear, all works perfectly fine. And the other way of faking the shear is just through teleporting abilities. Chamber, Omen, and Yoru have a really easy time just walking through and TPing back completely safe. And finally, her third counter is really simply breaking her Razor Vines. Silva Shock Dart, Raze Nade lineups, heck, every Molly in the game. All of that just is a way of breaking Vines and making her setup a lot weaker because of it. So according to the tier list that I put together in like 5 minutes, that's 60% of the agents, maybe 70 if you want to be mean about it, that has a way to counter Vyse's full utility setups on defense. I mean, like, best case scenario is the enemy team's kind of stupid, they just run in, get isolated, and, you know, Vyse gets her 1v1. But more likely, they go mid or hit the other site, and you're useless now. Or they play a default, break all your shit, and then you're also useless. See what I mean? Like, Vyse on paper sounds like she should be good, but in reality, just not great. Jack of all trades, master of none. But if you thought that was bad, Vyse as an initiator is just straight dog water. Only her Arc Rose, her flash is really useful, but it's super easy to break and way easy to dodge, which translates into you're not gonna flash anything anytime you want to push. It's way too slow, and at that point you'd rather have just a Sky or a Breach or even just like a Sova to get the information instead of the Arc Rose itself. Razor Vines on attack kind of fucking suck. It's a big loud projectile that's slow to activate and easy to break. Even if you have lineups to land at chokes when you push for executes, there's no guarantee it's gonna go off. Compare that to Killjoy's Nano Swarms that only take half a second instead of 3/4 of a second to activate and are only a fraction of the size. It's way harder to break, way more useful, and, you know, more reliable to use. Even if the vines are activated, there's no guarantee that the enemies won't just run through it, take 1 or 2 ticks of damage, get a free kill, and then go right back. Not like the 15% slow is actually doing anything. As a defender, I might just swing it just because I want to catch my opponents off guard and I'm willing to take a little bit of damage to get a free kill. Obviously, as an initiator, shear is not going to be a very useful ability, but Steel Garden, the ultimate, might have some uses. In theory, it seems like a pretty good ultimate, but realistically, I feel like a lot of people find it pretty underwhelming. Shorties, Sheriffs, even Classics all can just one-shot you in the face if you're close enough. It's a small advantage, but would you not rather have a better ultimate for an AoE retake? Something like a Breach or a Fade or a Brim or a KO or heck, even a Killjoy. But of course, we're only accounting for if we actually hit our opponents, which is not a guarantee. Since the radius of the ultimate is centered around the player, your effective range is basically cut in half. So when you see yourself on the minimap and that giant circle pops up, you have to remember only half of that is actually going going to get used. Plus, it's really hard not to leave gaps to dodge your ultimate when you're trying to fit a giant circle over a bunch of rectangular spaces. And the activation time of 3.4 seconds is really slow. That's plenty of time for the enemies to fall back, dodge the ultimate, and flood back in with guns that you're not expecting them to have. Look, I'm not trying to call Steel Garden a bad ultimate, but it really comes down to, wouldn't you just rather have a better Initiator's ultimate at that point? When we're working with these hybrid characters, between Sentinel and Initiator, we have to really take into account to what are we giving up in place of having this character instead. And it's really hard for me to rationalize ever putting a Vyse in over a better Sentinel or a better Initiator. So why even play this character at this point? As a Sentinel and as an Initiator, she's just not good enough, doesn't stand out, so what's the point? Well, the point is, despite my conjecture, Vyse is performing pretty well. In fact, she's about decently average or even slightly above average in basically all categories except pick rate. Win percentage, it's a little bit low, 49.4, but KD at 0.98, which is pretty high. It's above average, let me tell you that. Damage delta, well above average at 0.6, even being positive, which is not all that common, honestly. Even the lead balance design, live balance design lead. Fuck, reading is hard, man. I think I'm dyslexic. In Valorant's 2024 year-end community stream on December 8th, Mr. Dan Penguin Hardison says this when discussing Vyse.
How's Vyse doing compared to other Sentinels?
Yeah, I can take this one. So for Vyse, I think generally the character is released pretty well, pretty balanced for the most part. We'll still have to kind of see how the other Sentinel changes shake things up, like if Cypher's nerfs kind of give some space for Vyse to exist in the ecosystem, or if Sage is going to start eating some of that space. We do think Vyse could use a little bit of a tune-up, particularly on her Brambles. So we'll be taking a pass at some Brambles and some other light quality of life stuff soon. That'll be in patch 9.11, similar to the Neon nerfs. But overall, I think they're doing really well.
So what's going on here? Why am I and the rest of the community just kind of wrong about this character? I think a large part has to do about its pick rate. It's a really low pick rate, basically the third lowest at 0.9%. Not 9%, 0.9%. So that's definitely a factor of why the perception of Valorant game developers is a little bit different from my analysis and sort of the character's public opinion, but I think there's another layer to this problem. Simply put, it's perspective. I'm seeing Vyse from the eyes of a Sentinel main who is deciding if they want to learn a new character. Is learning this new character worth my time? Will she be any good? How does this compare to the existing mains I already play? I'm looking at this character from an individualistic lens because it's going to be the thing that affects me the most. But for the Riot developers, they're going to be taking more of a global approach to seeing how this character plays out. So let's take a little bit of a moment to look at the game development side, think about how Vyse is meant to be played and exactly what we should be doing to make her strong according to the game developers that created her. That's right, it's time to come full circle. We're going to be taking a look at Vyse through the lens of authorial intent. First things first, we need to talk about a business term, transferable skills. Basically, the skills and knowledge you develop on one job that you can transfer to another. I know, revolutionary. Who could have guessed? But of course, this doesn't just apply to the corporate world. If it did, why would I be talking about it? We can use this effect and take any skill or knowledge and apply it anywhere else we want. On the small scale, we can do something like character to character in Valorant. Like how Omen can use a smoke to fight on sight, but so can a Cypher. He can do the exact same thing and be a self-sufficient little rat on points. Or how the weight of certain throwable objects are the exact same as other pieces of util. Think of Viper Orb and a Killjoy Molly. That might not sound super useful and transferable, but it is, because if you go into a custom game and turn on cheats, anytime you use a Viper Orb, you can see on the minimap where it's going to land. So it's a great way to learn and create new lineups for all the tech nerds out there like me. So, you're welcome Killjoy, Gecko, KO, and Deadlock mains out there. And of course, you can always thank me by subscribing, smile. On a slightly larger scale, we can take transferable skills from game to game. The biggest comparison is going from CSGO to Valorant. That's a pretty easy one to understand since Valorant's movement and gameplay is just so heavily inspired by Counter-Strike. But also, Overwatch to Valorant. How you use your abilities and think about ultimates is critical. That's why I find myself, a former tier 2 coach in Overwatch 1, thriving when it comes to utility, but falling a little bit short when it comes to mechanics. And finally, on the end of the transferable skills spectrum, or at least the end that I'm going to talk about today, we're going to go from art to Valorant. And yes, this is obviously something we've already talked about, but I want to take a slightly different approach, and instead of looking at it from a ground up perspective, I want to look at it from a top down perspective. So let's start with a prompt. start with the problem of why Vyse really isn't that good, and see how applying both authorial intent and death of the author can solve it. Starting off with authorial intent, how does the game developers want us to play Vyse? Well, to start, not like Cypher. It's clear to me that there are way too many gaps in the plan of put all your units all in one site. It's just too counterable, too easy to maneuver around. I think a lot of people are playing Vyse for her kill setups, but in reality, I think her strongest attribute is actually her stall. When we're talking about Razorvine and we start to fixate on its damage, it definitely falls short in comparison to actual mollies. Hell, you can probably expect more kills from a Skydog than the actual Brambles itself. But instead, if we focus on the slow, and yes, only 15% kinda sucks, but the radius is huge. It does a lot of chip damage to any enemies who are trying to ignore it and just run through, but most importantly, the thing lasts forever. 10 seconds is a long time. Slow Orb only lasts 7 seconds, and Killjoy mollies only 4. I don't think you can fully understand how long that is, so to prove my point, here's 10 seconds of agonizing silence. Two Razorvines in a row, that's 20 seconds, and to prove how long 20 seconds is, here's another 20 seconds of silence. JK, I'm not gonna do that to you. I wouldn't do that to you twice. I think it's really easy to see Vyse's ability to set up her utility in the buy phase as an invitation to play a lot like Cypher or Killjoy. And that leaves a lot of players that play the character incorrectly and kind of just write her off when she doesn't work that well. But instead, I think it's really obvious that the game developers want Vyse to be more of a stall sentinel. It's kind of like Sage's counterpart, where Sage can stop a rush reactively, but Vyse can stop a rush proactively. Man, I don't think proactive is the right word I'm looking for, but I feel like you guys get the point. So understanding Vyse's authorial intent, how do we actually apply this to our gameplay? Let's answer that question with another question. Here's your pop quiz. How long does Vyse's shear, her wall, stay up once activated? The answer? 7 seconds, not including the 0.8 seconds it takes once you activate the wall to go up and the 0.8 seconds for the wall to go down. So some quick maths, that is 8.6 seconds of total wall stall. Next question, how long is the cooldown after popping Vyse's Arc Rose? The answer is 20 seconds, or 40 seconds if the rose gets broken. And the final question, which really should be pretty easy if you've been paying attention, how long is the Razorvine's duration? Yes, Alex, I'd like to answer, what is 10 seconds? So, with all that information, y'all picking up what I'm putting down? Here's what I'm trying to say. If you flash off of wall contact, then pop your Razorvines right as the wall goes down, by the time the enemies can flood back in, you basically have flash.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
This also means you can keep both of your Razorvines in your back pocket just in case. Suddenly, those mid and retake situations we talked about before are way easier because you have those vines to use elsewhere. And if the enemies default to fake your wall, you aren't wasting your entire kit off of one jump peak. This even counters that line up Larry strategy where they just break all your vines before they can even hit the site. You see, the problem with Vyse was never the way she was designed, but the way we chose to play her because we thought of her as a sentinel. So if we abandon some of those full site setups, we have a lot more flexibility for different options. Things like you can put a Razorvine on the other side of the map so you have control of both sides if the enemy goes for a full push. Then if the enemies try to split you, you have those vines to stop the mid push, but also the wall flash vines flash again combo that will stop the people in the main rush. I should really come up with a name for that, something creative and original. You know, like the elbow fever cycle or elbow fever strategy. If somebody has a better name for it, and especially if that name pays homage to its creator, make sure to leave that in the comments. That'd be really nice of you. So I think as a sentinel, as a defender, Vyse is kind of in a better place with these sort of gameplay style changes, but I still think as an initiator, our understanding of the authorial intent isn't still there. We already talked about a lot of reasons I don't think she really works too well on the attack side, but one thing I didn't mention was that her flashes actually make noise when you hit an opponent. Obviously, that's a very clear game design choice, but the question becomes, what does it mean? I'm not really sure, but I think a lot of people are seeing Vyse's initiator half to her kit as sort of a assisting initiator. I don't remember what I called it. Ah shit, I just remembered I called it set uppers as a joke and then never changed it, and now, god damn it. And that seems like the logical conclusion, you know, her flash is kind of like breach and KO and all that stuff to help your teams get in, to go fast, but the problem is because the Arc Rose is so slow, it just will never hit their opponents. But as we've seen in the past, there's a lot of setups where Gecko flashes and Sky flashes are used purely for information, especially because, at least back in the day when Sky had regenerational flashes, you could use use it multiple times in a round. And I think that's really the crux of her on the attacking side, is to use the arc rows to take space, not through popping and actually hitting people, but through information gathering, say like a Sova drone, which is really strange because a lot of the people playing Vyse right now in the pro scene just aren't really doing the things I would expect Vyse to do. And yeah, it's off season, but really? On binds? All of the util just to put there, just to... What? Why? Why? Because like, the wall's jumpable, right? Like, I'm not crazy, but that wall is jumpable. It's not very good. That's the one where Raze has played the most, one of the biggest counter against the vines just on the ground. Yoru's played a lot, so that's a huge counter against Vyse in multiple different ways. And double smoke is usually the meta with Viper, putting it down that lane that everyone just puts the Vyse wall. How? I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't get it. Somebody explain it to me. My best guess is like, people don't understand the counter strategies to Vyse yet, but that would be like a rank thing, right? Like, the pro players should know how to counter a Vyse by now, right? Like I'm smart enough to figure this out. You're telling me the coaches aren't smart enough to... Huh? Okay, let's calm down a little bit and move on to our conclusions, okay? Truth is, I really just made this video because I want to talk about a lot of art stuff and video games and, you know, just a lot of different tangents, as you could tell. But I genuinely think there's a lot of cool things you can do with art concepts that can help you as a Valorant player. As we discussed before, we can take that with the Spike, we can take that with Vyse, and a lot of other cool stuff. Obviously, with Vyse, at the moment, we really can only talk about the authorial intent. I think more people need to play the character and get really good at her before we can find really cool Death of the Author examples. But, you know, once that happens, I'm excited to talk about it. Big shout out to Chef, or at Seismic Chef on YouTube. I use a lot of his footage and also a lot of his gameplay as sort of like research on how to play the character. If there is going to be something interesting coming out of this character, I think it's likely going to come from this person, just because they're playing with her so much and sort of like, you know, their main. It's the Vyse main. And to wrap this up, I do want to restate that Valorant isn't art. It's also a lot of other things. It's an esports, it's a casual game, or a dating app for some people, you fucking freaks. It's all what you make of it. But of course, that doesn't mean your interpretation is all that Valorant can be. In fact, it can be very beneficial every once in a while to shift our perspective to see the game in a new light. Art just happens to be the thing in my life that's really important, so grafting those ideas and concepts onto my favorite game just turned out to be a lot of fun and actually really helpful. Hopefully you can agree and find a new interesting way to appreciate the game we all know and tolerate. But whatever your takeaway is, I just want to say one thing. Thank you to today's sponsor, the Costco hot dog and ramen noodles. I am so broke, somebody help me.
A slow day, slow